Good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to get started here on our busy Friday afternoon. We are going to start this afternoon with the University System of Maryland with Dr. Perman and Sarah Baker. You are going to start us off.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start with Exhibit 2 on page 6, which shows the impact COVID had on undergraduate enrollment. Fall 2019 is used as a baseline for comparison. And since 2019, enrollment has declined 5.1%, and when excluding global campus, it fell by 8.5%. Only 3 institutions saw enrollment increase during this time, and 3, University of Baltimore, Frostburg, and Coppin, had declines exceeding 25%. Overall, the declines in enrollment leads to concern about the financial stability of these institutions as they need to find ways to cover the loss of revenues. Exhibit 3 on page 7 breaks down enrollment by student category. The largest decline in students occurred in fall 22, and that was due to a decrease of over 5,000 students not returning, continuing students not returning. I would note that the number of first-time students has rebounded and exceeds pre-pandemic levels. Exhibit 4 on page 8 looks at the attrition by student level. This shows the percentage of students who did not return to the same institution. The percentage of students who did not return in fall 2020 declined across all levels, which indicates remote learning did not keep these students from re-enrolling. However, the percentages increased in fall 21, which may suggest students may not have had a positive experience with remote learning. I would note that the percentage of freshmen not re-enrolling has declined from 30% in 2019 to 27% in 2022. But there are concerns about the percentage of juniors and seniors not coming back. We asked the Chancellor to comment on efforts institutions are taking to retain students and efforts to reach out to those who have stopped out to return and earn a degree. Turning to fall enrollment on page 9, Exhibit 5 shows the changes in fall 21 and 22 undergraduate enrollment. After 2 years of decline, there were questions if enrollment would rebound to pre-pandemic levels. While enrollment did decline 0.9%, the rate slowed to pre-pandemic levels. Only 3 institutions saw enrollment increase: UMB, Eastern Shore, and Global Campus. And 2 institutions, University of Baltimore and Frostburg, had declines exceeding 10%. We asked the Chancellor to comment on efforts of System Office and the Regents to assist those institutions experience continuous decline in enrollment to stabilize enrollment and maintain their fiscal stability. Exhibit 6 on page 11 shows enrollment at USM's regional higher education centers. After enrollment increased in 21 by 12%, mainly due to medical cannabis program at Shady Grove and the physician assistant program at Hagerstown, enrollment declined 3.7% in 2022. Of concern is enrollment at Southern Maryland has fallen 32% since 2018. We asked the Chancellor to comment on efforts to bolster enrollments in Southern Maryland. Turning to Exhibit 7 on page 12 and the second-year retention rates and the impact of COVID. When comparing the 2019 and 22 fiscal year cohorts, you can see that the rates have not recovered to pre-pandemic levels. Only Eastern Shore saw a slight increase in its retention rates, while Coppin and University of Baltimore declined by 8 percentage points. Exhibit 8 on page 13 compares the third-year retention rates of the 2019 and 21 cohorts. All institutions saw their rates decline, and most experienced decreases of 2 or 3 percentage points. I would note that these declines could have been worse if not for the programs institutions developed to help those sophomores adjust to campus life after being in a virtual learning environment. We asked the Chancellor to comment on efforts by institutions to reach out to students to encourage them to return to college and earn a degree. Exhibit 9 on page 14 compares the 6-year graduation rate of the fiscal 14 and 17 cohorts. Only 4 institutions experienced increase in the graduation rates, and Eastern Shore had the largest decline of 6 percentage points. Moving on to undergraduate degree production, on page 6, Exhibit 10 on page 16 compares the number of degrees awarded between 2010 and 2022. Overall degree production has increased 42.3%. While the number of workforce-related degrees increased by over 62%, other degrees fell by 18%. Moving on to the budget, at the bottom of the page, there are 3 proposed deficiencies that would provide $72.2 million in general funds. One is $69.6 million, which is USM's share of the deficiency related to the 4.5% COLA. The other would replace $7.7 million in general funds with higher education investment funds. A third would provide 7 institutions with one-time $2.6 million funding to fund the 4.5% COLA for non-state supportive positions. And this is, the allocation is shown in Exhibit 11. Non-state supported positions include those with, in auxiliary, which are self-supported enterprises, and positions funded through grants and contracts. Since the COLA became effective during the academic year after the rates had been set, it left institutions scrambling to cover the cost of non-state supported positions. While the state does provide funds for general salary increases for state-supported positions, it is expected institutions will use other funds to cover increases for non-state supported positions. It is expected that this COLA will be incorporated into the rates for the next academic year. Turning to Exhibit 12 in the proposed budget, after adjusting for the deficiencies and the general salary increases, state funds increased 12.1% or $238.5 million. The salary enhancements account for about 62.5% of the increase, and $28.6 million are related to several mandates that are listed on page 20. This leaves $65.9 million of state funds to cover costs of other program enhancements. We asked the Chancellor to comment on how USN intends to use these remaining state funds. I would note that restricted funds decreased $64.8 million, mainly due to the planned expenditure of $71 million of federal relief funds. Exhibit 13 on page 21 shows unrestricted revenues and expenditures. In 21, through various actions to reduce expenditures and the use of federal relief funds, USM was able to cover an $89.3 million deficiency in auxiliary. In 22, with the return of more normal operations, auxiliary revenues grew 71%, reflecting full occupancy of residence halls, resulting in USM ending 22 with a $152.9 million surplus. In 23, expenditures increased 13%, mainly due to general and salary increases, and revenues only grow 9.6%, resulting in an operating deficiency of $64.8 million. And this is more than covered by the $102 million surplus in auxiliary revenues. Turning to personnel, Exhibit 14 on page 24 shows authorized and filled positions. And when comparing 2019 to 2022, overall the vacancy rate increased from 5.1% to 10.3%. The largest increase in vacant positions occurred in institutional support, and operation and maintenance of plants has a vacancy rate exceeding 16%, which reflects current hiring challenges. And so I'm going to now turn it over to Kelly for the first issue, which begins on page 25.
In 2022, Global Campus sold its Largo properties to the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission for $75 million and laid off 43 workers, saving another $5 million. These actions come after the approval of a $500 million advertising campaign in 2019. The campaign's purpose was to increase enrollment outside of the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area in the military. Exhibit 15 on page 25 shows the national marketing campaign budget. $55.7 million has been spent, and $16.5 million in total is budgeted for fiscal 2023 and 2024. The first year of the campaign yielded only 212 students. Global Campus has since changed its marketing approach to backward integration, looking to expand its market share in places Global Campus has a physical presence. Global Campus should address the effectiveness of this new marketing strategy. Global Campus's business model is based on enrollment growth and a modest level of state support. Exhibit 16 on page 26 shows that for fiscal 2023, Global Campus is receiving the lowest state support per student at $1,021.03. Global Campus takes a financial loss with the Maryland Completion Scholarship Program because it is an institutionally funded scholarship, and the university took an $8 million financial hit in fiscal 2022. To continue to support Maryland students and be a viable business, Global Campus depends on economies of scale. The large enrollment keeps costs down because its operating costs are divided among Global Campus's many students. Therefore, the university needs to continue to grow enrollment. Online education is a competitive market and continues to expand. Exhibit 17 on page 27 shows the growing number of online education institutions reported by the National Council for State Authorization Reciprocity Agreements, or NC-SARA. NC-SARA collects data on exclusively distance education enrollment. Exhibit 18 on page 28 shows that Global Campus is a top 10 school in online education and one of only 3 public universities on the list. But Exhibit 19 on page 28 shows that it is the only school in the top 10 with higher in-state enrollment than out-of-state enrollment. Global Campus should discuss its financial outlook and how it can compete with private universities. And Sarah Benker will cover the next issue.
So at the bottom of the page is the next issue of prison education program. So beginning in July, Pell Grants will be available to incarcerated individuals in prisons with eligible prison education plans. Institutions willing to offer programs will need to complete a lengthy approval process, and this is summarized on page 30, one of which is approval will be needed from the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. In addition, Correctional Services is required to make a determination after an initial 2-year period if the program is operating in the student's best interest. Without this, an institution would not be eligible to award a Pell Grant. So last summer, 2 regents, the chancellor, and staff from the system office met with the Secretary of Public Safety to discuss the potential for a USM prison education program. This resulted in the establishment of a work group from representatives from all segments of higher education and corrections. Presentations were made on current programs, and these are summarized on page 30. From this came the establishment of the Maryland Correctional Higher Education Advisory Committee that is chaired by Corrections. It also includes Department of Labor, MHEC, and the Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center. The committee will review all proposed plans and coordinate efforts between institutions so programs are not duplicated at any one facility. And the next steps are shown on page 32. Towards the bottom of the page starts the discussion of Maryland Center for Computing Education. Chapter 358 of 2018 established the center to strengthen the skills of computer science education and increase the number of computer science teachers in elementary and secondary public schools. The center received $5 million in general funds in 2019 and $1 million in 2020 and 2021. Recently, the center and Maryland's computer science community were recognized as the first state ever to offer computer science in every public high school. Exhibit 20 on page 33 shows the percentage of public high schools that have had enrollment in computer science courses, which reached 98% with the 21-22 academic year. The center also provides professional development for pre-kindergarten through high school teachers. Through June 21, over 1,200 teachers have attended their programs, and since 2018, the center has provided professional development for educators from 725 public high schools. The center also administers 2 grant programs, and these are listed on page 34. One is the Institutes for Higher Education Pre-Service Teacher Education Grant Program, and the other grant is for LEAs to build a computer science planning team. The center also works in collaboration with MDLS to maintain an interactive dashboard that provides data at the state, local school system, and local high school system. So as shown in 21 on page 35, Exhibit 21 on page 35, the percentage of graduating females participating in a computer science course increased from 11% to 29% with the 2020 class. Exhibit 22 on page 36 shows the percentage of graduates who participate in computer science course by race, and you'll note that it has increased for all groups of students. Overall, 35% of the 2020 graduates who took at least one computer science course, 55% of them enrolled full-time in college, and 17% of them declared a major in computer science. The last issue of USM's strategic plan starts at the bottom of the page. The plan was developed during the uncertainties of the pandemic, which resulted in some changes to the academic and business models, and these were taken into consideration when developing the plan. The focus of the plan has shifted from the traditional college-age student to the non-traditional student, and the business model will shift from institution-centric and process-oriented to learner-centered. The plan centers around 5 priorities, including access, affordability, achievement, workforce and economic development, and diversity, equality, and inclusion. A draft implementation plan has been developed and is to be presented at the Board of Regents meeting at their meeting this month. So Exhibit 23 just provides some of the draft metrics related to academics and their targets and the goals. So USM will be monitoring and tracking progress on these goals, including through its dashboards indicators available on its website. And turning to recommendations on page 40, and is to concur with the governor's allowance. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for a good presentation with your team here.
Yep.
Okay, I think the first group coming up then will be Dr. Jay Perman, Alan Herbst, Dr. Joan Bachman, and Dr. Allison Rinn. Since I know everyone has read your remarks, every single word, you can kind of pull your highlights out if you'd like and answer the questions. Do your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, Senators. Thank you for having us again today. With me at the table, next to me, our Board of Regents Chair, Ms. Linda Gooden. And you've met Dr. Allison Rinn, who is our new Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs. We know, sadly, that Dr. Boffman is retiring from that role at the end of this month. One of her many legacies was mentioned by Ms. Baker, namely the Maryland Center for Computing Education. And we in Maryland can all be proud of that. Ms. Ellen Herbst, of course, is our Senior Vice Chancellor for Administration and Finance. And in response to the questions regarding UMGC, I'm happy to have our terrific president of UMGC, Dr. Greg Fowler, who will come up and respond to those questions. We obviously unreservedly endorse the governor's FY24 allowance. Thank you to all of you for steadfast support of higher education in Maryland. You know that college matters, and you show it. Always thank you for your trust, your partnership, your leadership. I've been asked to comment, and I'll get right into the analyst questions. And thank you, by the way, for a terrific analysis. I've been asked to comment on efforts we're taking to retain all students, but also to re-engage those that dropped out. The system's second-year retention rate of 83% is above the national average with everything that's happened. Our 4-year graduation rate of 53%, 6-year rate of 71%, all above the national average. And our 4-year rate, again, despite the pandemic, is at an all-time high, meaning more students are spending less time and money in pursuit of a degree. And I hope it becomes obvious that we're getting the students out earlier. That has an impact on enrollment. It's a good thing, but when you count the numbers, it has an impact. To focus on and bolster retention and graduation numbers, as I said to you yesterday, we rely on academic support, on advising, on financial aid. Academic support, coaching, tutoring, peer mentoring, living learning communities where students of like interest live together, have the right RA, residence advisor, to stimulate them, create networks and conversations. The system office meets regularly with our leaders on the campuses to make sure those things are getting done. We talked yesterday about intrusive advising. We had a good conversation about that, so I'm not going to reemphasize that. But it's key to our strategy. And again, we use data analytics. We know when a student is struggling, and we respond. We talked about financial support, and I'll just reiterate today that retention, graduation rates, not surprisingly, are significantly higher for students who receive institutional aid compared with those who don't. They're more likely to finish. I mentioned yesterday that our universities target $64 million annually to students in need. There's much more that comes in terms of other kinds of scholarships, but 64 million students in need, and that's the number that's climbed 50% in the last decade, as has the number of students receiving that aid. To reduce attrition between school years, our financial aid offices are extending aid packages to returning students earlier in the academic calendar so that they can plan, so that they're reassured. We're paying particular attention to that population of students who just miss the Pell Grant eligibility mark, some by only hundreds of dollars, and then they're denied a federal lifeline, if you will, that substantially boosts retention and graduation. Chair King, I hope it's appropriate to thank you for supporting our proposal for a quasi-endowment. We've got skin in the game. We want to have...
I'm hoping that the rest of my committee is going to support
We'll
that.
hope with you. Yes, thank you. To re-engage students that have stopped out of their education, all of our universities have developed near-completer programs. We're working very closely with MHEC to determine how we can best align our programs with MHEC's. Every near-completer program is a little different, one from the other. Most involve direct outreach to former students through multiple platforms, waiving of fees, help with course registration, targeted financial aid services, and advising that's tailored to the re-enrolling students' needs.
Can I ask you one question?
Of course.
And I don't need an answer to this. I don't want to put you on the spot or derail you on your talk here, but the problems that we're having with 529, you may not be ready to answer that today, but how is that affecting the finances at Maryland?
I sent a letter in December, Chair King, to all of our presidents, asking them to be aware of it and provide forbearance where appropriate.
Okay. We just have not heard from anybody as to what the effects of that have been, but I'm sure there have to be some.
Well, we're keeping an eye on it, and we're being responsive.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I've been asked to comment on the USM office, on efforts at our office, the Board of Regents, to help universities experiencing enrollment declines. The chair appointed an enrollment work group which meets regularly to review enrollment trends, issues, and challenges, to develop plans for addressing the challenges, and to advance the enrollment goals attached to metrics that you'll find in the system strategic plan that Ms. Baker put forward. Through this enrollment work group and through the system office's collaboration with the universities, each of our institutions, and this has not been the case historically, each of our institutions now has a cabinet-level position dedicated to enrollment management. I and senior staff meet quarterly with the enrollment challenge universities so that they can brief us on their progress. And we discuss the enrollment and retention strategies that they're using. I am encouraged. These reports are coming in. They're anecdotal at this point, but I am hearing, consistent with the fact that our first-timers have been increasing now, that the applications are coming in for some of the institutions higher than they've ever been. So I think higher ed has stabilized. That's what's going on nationally, and I think that's what's going on now. But the point I'm trying to get across is we're watching this, we're demanding accountability. And I'll make one more point for the system. When we do this our way, best practices, things that are working, are shared among the institutions. That's the advantage that scale gives us. That's the advantage of your university system. I've been asked to comment on efforts to bolster enrollment at USM at Southern Maryland. And yes, I'm looking closely at my senator, Senator Bailey, who I know has been a partner in this. You know, Southern Maryland, its difficulties are exacerbated, and a lot of that decline is because 4 of the non-USM institutions, which were there when we came, they previously offered programs at the center, but like many other programs, they pivoted to online-only instruction during the pandemic. So they've withdrawn, and they're teaching their programs fully online. Given this and other challenges, the center's approaching enrollment growth in 2 ways. First, they are working in the system with our university partners to offer new programs starting this fall, especially in high-need areas like computing, teaching, and nursing. I'm very pleased with how Bowie State University has grabbed onto this. I think they're launching, Joe, 7 programs at Southern Maryland. The center's executive director meets regularly with provosts across the system to identify more opportunities for growth in high-demand programs. And they figure out how we're going to offset costs and pay for this. Programs are being made available as hybrid programs or high-flex options. High-flex options, it's again, meeting the student with what they want. You want to do in-person, you can take the course in person. You want to do online, it's online. You can even do it asynchronously. You get the material, you can do it when you have time. So we're in the modern era, and we're being responsive to students there. I said there were 2 approaches at Southern Maryland. The second approach involves working with partners in Southern Maryland, particularly the College of Southern Maryland, the Tri-County School Districts, and the Pax River Education Office, so that we can develop a more robust pipeline of students for the center. This work is bringing about a shift in who the system serves. Little shift, maybe a larger shift, from graduate studies to the undergraduate, particularly because of the marriage with the College of Southern Maryland. And I think you all know, serving baccalaureate students is different and in many ways more demanding than serving graduate students. The support they need, the community they need is different. So the point I'm making is that the center's got 10 staff members to accomplish what we've identified as top priorities: recruiting local students from the community college, reaching underserved populations, which we're very committed to in Southern Maryland, providing them the wraparound support they need, and of course being responsive to our federal government partners and local business and industry so we can be responsive to them. So we've got our eyes on it. I've been asked to comment on our efforts to re-engage upper division, third-year students, let's say, who stop out. And as you heard, the pandemic has taken a toll on retention rates at that level. There's a trough in between. The first years are coming back. We're getting the fourth years out faster, and then there's that dip. And you all know the reasons for the dip. The pandemic, as it affected all of us, it affected students. Family issues, emotional well-being, they need a job, they've got to make money. And the most vulnerable students are increasingly affected. The students also, some of the students that are now third year, they're beginning college campus experience after 2 years of remote learning. That's a challenge in itself. The pandemic, no question, was a major disruption, but we have to deal with it. So we're countering stop-outs by devising new tactics that are targeted to students' needs. And we talked about this yesterday. Sometimes the needs are relatively small. They have to pay the rent. They've got a bill that bothers them. Or they don't know how to navigate something that to us looks like a minor administrative issue. That happens all the time. These are hurdles that what I just said that we can eliminate quickly if we identify them quickly and if we have the right resources in place. Having said that, we've stood up all kinds of programs across the 12 institutions and 3 RHECs that are our responsibility. We've got new advising models for transfer students. We've got one-on-one academic and financial counseling, paying a lot of attention to mental health services. We're trying to enlarge those as best we can. Some of them are remote. I mentioned the early financial aid offers, the hybrid, high flex, food pantries, microgrants that we've talked about, technology-enabled 24/7 services that make it easier for students to access help when it's most on their mind and when it's bothering them. And we have targeted outreach to that population that we call SCND. Some college, no degree. They're out there. We're targeting them and saying, we'll do all of this kind of stuff. Why don't you come back and get your degree? And that's working. I think the last time I heard from our colleagues at UMBC for the previous year, I remember a number of 130 students, these kind of students who came back for the academic year. You look like you have a question.
I do. I just, from so many of the students that I work with, and it's different ages, it's not just, recent high school graduates. For the people that are in the field, in the college field, they know all the language, they understand the technology, and they can get things done. But for a student that has no clue how to sign up for classes and how to do all that, it is like a foreign language. So, and I think you're just doing such a great job with the outreach to all the needs of with, I think years ago it was so much easier because we didn't have the technology and we didn't have all that we have now, but it's pretty foreign to students that haven't been exposed to any of that. So you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you for that. It'd be nice if we could get all the way to concierge services. One call, as one of those lawyer commercials goes, one call, that's all. You need some help? Come on. We're working to get as close to that as possible. I've been asked to comment. I'm almost done. All right. I've been asked to comment on how the system intends to use a projected surplus of $65.9 million in state funding. Ms. Baker went into this. The funding referenced in the analysis is allocated for increases in fringe benefits and statewide adjustments based on the DBM summary provided to us. These are mandatory costs due to rate hikes in health insurance and other benefits provided to state employees. One final comment before I ask Dr. Fowler to respond to the questions. I am so happy that Ms. Baker went into detail about the prison education program. We are very invested in this. You know, this is not something that's going to boom our enrollment. That's not the point. I think all of you know the difference in the recidivism rates. You don't even need to use statistics. It's so different between somebody not exposed to education while in prison and then hopefully get to our campus when they're released versus somebody that gets this program. So we've got presence by several of our institutions at Jessup. We're talking with and this is all through the Department of Corrections, we're talking with the Eastern Correctional Institute. That's certainly our University of Maryland Eastern Shore. And then what we've learned is that there is a great need in Western Maryland. There's a great need in the prisons in Hagerstown and West. So we're going to try to cover that ground. President Fowler.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair and Senators, thank you for the opportunity to answer a couple of your questions. I'll try to be very brief with this, but do want to say thank you for the time here, and also thank you to the analysts who spent some time with us, Kelly Norton and Sarah Baker. We really appreciate the work that you've done on this as well. And so the two questions that I've been asked to answer are around our new marketing strategy and how we can remain competitive in an increasingly competitive marketplace. And that's going to continue to be the case as we move forward. We certainly see that beginning in 2019 and 2020, only about 30 to 35% of schools had, on a national basis, some type of online program. Coming out of that, as we begin to look at surveys, somewhere around 85 to 88% of schools are intending to stay in this marketplace as we continue to move forward. So one of the questions that we have to deal with is, as we try to work on a national scale, what does that look like? And I'll certainly address those questions, but also want to just take a moment to say, while we are committed, of course, to working on a national basis, we are equally committed to our work here within the state of Maryland. We're very proud to be a part of the University System of Maryland when it comes to the work we're doing. Some 35,000 Marylanders last year took classes at UMGC, and we're very proud to have done that work. And recently had a great milestone that we were able to come across, which was 100,000 Maryland residents who are now alumni of UMGC. So we take that as equally part of our job as the work we're trying to do nationally as we're trying to maintain our business model. On a national basis, when we're looking at competitive marketing strategies, as my friend and boss here, Jay, will know, I spent the last 15 years of my life working at what are now the two largest national players in this space, Southern New Hampshire University and Western Governors University. And I bring that experience and awareness of how we did that to this conversation that we are having now. And a lot of the work that we are doing is based upon using our place, using the spaces that we are currently operating in to sort of serve as a core as we try to amplify our presence in those things. So our business plan has been very much now to take the fact that we have some 100 locations around the country and focus in on some of those places where we believe we can amplify our work, working with community colleges, working with businesses, working with corporations who are looking for skill sets in different ways as we move forward. And we have seen some success with that. In the last year alone, for example, we had some 1,000 new enrollments from some of the work that we've been doing with corporations and others to make sure that we are building out the types of experiences that they will need. So we will continue doing that work and have a great deal of confidence that that work will yield our ability to remain competitive in that space. We instituted in the last period of time a series of practices that we've seen around student services, around the analytics that the Chancellor was talking about a minute ago, and other things that have also continued to see some increase in the demand that we are talking about. Again, the community colleges that we are talking to are working with us on how do we serve their students best, how do we work on transfer, and how do we do things that the other national players are doing. So we have some strong confidence that we'll be able to continue doing that.
Thank you.
So that concludes our testimony, and we'll be glad to answer questions, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. Senator Benson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You know, I'm an educator. It's really a pleasure for me to sit here and hear this, the wonderful comments and how you all are moving forward, particularly as it pertains to the returning citizens, our inmates. I am a believer that education is the way up and out.
For sure.
There's no doubt about it, and I think that that's an excellent step, and it's in the right direction. And it ties right into what the governor talked about a couple of days ago. And so, it's just really wonderful. But I want to ask a question about the mental health of our students. I'm sure I don't have to tell you all that has been a critical problem, particularly since the pandemic. Not only does it impact the students, but it also impacts the staff and the people who work on the campus. Do you all have a few moments to talk to us just a little bit more about how you all are moving forward in the way of working with students and the staff and the people who work on the campus as it pertains to mental health?
Well, thank you so much, Senator, first of all, for your reinforcing comments about educating prisoners. This is really the bottom line. This and thinking about our children, as you say, that education is the way up and out. It defines what we care about and what we're doing, so thank you for that. I may have mentioned this in yesterday's hearing when we were talking about Latinx students. Once a month, Sunday mornings, I have to do it online now, but it'll be back in my kitchen soon. I ask our student affairs leaders on the 12 campuses and at the regional higher education centers to invite 2 students, each campus, that they think are appropriate to either a certain demographic or certain interest. But no matter who it is, the first thing that comes up is the need for mental health support. Wow. So it's issue number 1. And as you pointed out, Senator, it affects not only the students, but affects the staff and faculty also because they care about the students, but because it affects them directly. We're all in this. So we've had great demands on mental health services, and it's not simply a matter of money. We would invest, and we do. But one of the problems in my work as a physician and as a pediatrician, it's been estimated for years that 30% of the pediatric population before the pandemic, of the pediatric population, could benefit from behavioral health therapy. There's no way to meet that need. There's no way with regard to psychiatrists, with psychologists. We are building in our own institutions psychiatric social workers, and we're doing that at Shady Grove to try to expand the pool. So one of the issues, no matter how much money you have to give to it, is the provider pool. So what else can we do? And a lot of this I've gotten from the students who chat with me on a Sunday morning. They say, teach us. Now, when they say teach us, it's not quite the formality of a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Teach us how to be effective peers for our students in need. So we're using that as a tactic. We also have used remote services. A lot of this is being provided around the country on campuses so that you can call somebody in the middle of the night and talk to them remotely, which makes a difference. Joe, do you want to add anything?
The One thing I would add is that our counseling center directors meet together on a regular basis and share good practices. And one of the things that has changed is rather than a student who comes to the counseling center, and it used to be that their first appointment was an entry appointment and just getting demographic data and so on, and then they would get an appointment to come back. We've flipped that model so that the first time they come to us, we deal directly with the issue that they are having. And many times that helps diffuse it, and then we engage them and determine whether they need to come back for either short-term or long-term counseling. But one of our campuses demonstrated that model worked very well, and all of our system schools immediately flipped that model and saw an immediate change. That many times these students get into a specific, acute, high-stress situation, and you can help them diffuse that stress, and then in a longer term, you can deal with their issues, not only with the professional counselors, but with peer counselors as well. So that's one example of the kinds of things that we're doing together.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, just one more comment so that we cover the issue well. We've been burdened even before the pandemic, and I don't mean burdened in a bad way. These are our responsibilities. More and more students come to campus on medications. Mm-hmm. And those medications, you know, we're the substitute parent. So those medications need to be managed by an MD, by a psychiatrist. So a lot of additional work before the pandemic has gotten layered on. Now that so many medications are being used in managing behavior.
Might I add one more quick thing? One of the things that our counseling center directors have talked about greatly is, in fact, faculty development and staff development. And it's referred to generically as mental health first aid, if you will. Teaching, giving them the tools with which to engage, especially a student, and refer them immediately. And in fact, doing that professional development not only helps the student, but in fact relieves the faculty and the staff of the feeling of the burden of needing to take care of that student. So we are doing that professional development and getting the referral system in place as quickly as possible, which turns out to help students, staff, and faculty.
I'm so happy to hear all that. I'm glad that came up today, because it's something that we wonder about all the time, and it's just a huge issue with our kids.
It's the biggest issue.
Yeah.
The biggest.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Fowler, did you have any more comments? You're on my witness list. Or did you get to say everything you wanted to say?
I said everything that I wanted to say. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
I wouldn't make that offer.
Oh, that's probably true.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two more witnesses here that had something to say today. Denise Gilmore from AFSCME and Krista Bully. Are they here? Come on up to the table.
Hello, happy Friday.
Happy
my name
Friday.
is Denise Gilmore, and I'm a legislative director with AFSCME Council 3. We represent 6,000 hourly and salaried employees across the university system of Maryland. I wanted to begin by saying with over 80% of our members on state-supported PINs, we are very grateful that the governor's budget has increased state support for the system. We do hope these resources will be used for increased frontline staffing and retention, as we often feel overlooked on campus. We do want to point out a few issues that weren't covered in the overview. First, the USM does use a huge number of contractual and contingent employees. My sister to the left will talk about that a little bit more. Second, the USM is also one of the biggest outsourcers in the state of state jobs. This concerns us very much. There's very little transparency Hundreds of millions of dollars can be spent on these private contract. These include, but aren't limited to, dorms at most campuses being privatized, housekeeping at, I think, Bowie State University, UMBC, Towson, Coppin. The housekeeping services there have all been privatized. The power and heating plant at UMCP has been privatized. The list goes on. We just think that these big public institutions, are increasingly not having public employees operate the campuses. And, we would like to see certainly more of that work be brought in. We think it's a good policy for local economy and certainly for, maintaining the best services we can on those campuses. Third, we are also tracking the transition of the Workday payroll system. We had a lot of issues with this when Workday came into the state agencies. It's probably about 6 years ago now. At that point, we had sought as a remedy an ability for employees to grieve, to hold the employer accountable to resolving those types of paycheck issues much quicker. I just wanted to give a plug. We have a bill in on that to allow our USM employees to do that as well, and we would certainly appreciate the support of our legislators on this legislation. The fourth and final point is we're still having a lot of health and safety issues on campus. Just kind of going back to the pandemic, it was very difficult to get an agreement signed that would protect the health and safety of workers. We've also had issues with mold across many of the campuses. These are issues that we would, love legislative support and continuing to work on making sure that we're protecting our health and safety of workers. And then just the last final point I'll say is, we want to thank this committee and, this body and leadership for helping us pass legislation to consolidate bargaining under the USM. Pleased to report that we are currently undergoing those negotiations for our first master contract. We will certainly keep the legislator updated on how those negotiations go. We would love to have the chancellor join us at one of these negotiation sessions. But overall, we look forward to continuing to work with all of you and the USM system to improve, working conditions on campus. So thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next, we have Krista.
Yes.
Go
Good
ahead.
afternoon, everyone. My name is Krista Bully, and I am an employee of University of Maryland Global Campus, where I have been for 7.5 years. I am a member of AFSCME Council 3, which represents almost 6,000 hourly and salaried USM workers at almost every school in the system. I just wanted to point out some issues that we haven't been touched on in the overview. First, the USM has a huge number of contractual and contingent workers. These are workers, both faculty and staff, that work side by side with people like me, merit or regular class employees. The difference is these workers have no rights. They do not get state health benefits, nor do they have any retirement benefits or contributions. The last numbers that we have from the system indicate there are almost 5,000 of these workers. The USM has a workforce that is 83% of the size of our unionized workforce that lacks any worker protections or benefits. For example, at UMGC, where I work at, there was a layoff in September, and some of these positions that were laid off were posted or hired again under contingent workers. This also meant that some of those workers that were laid off and had the opportunity to apply again were hired as contingent employees instead of the non-exempt employee as they were before they were laid off. There's no protection for those workers when it's done this way, and we just really need that to change across the USM system. Some of the most critical positions are contingent and contractual in the USM system. And so we just wanted to point that out, and I really thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming over and sharing with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Next on our agenda today, we have the Maryland Economic Development Corporation. Emily Haskell is our budget analyst. Sorry about that. Keeping in mind, of course, that it's Friday afternoon. Just saying.
Just saying. Message received.
Thank you. My name is Emily Haskell, and I'll be presenting the budget analysis for the Maryland Economic Development Corporation, or MEDCO. MEDCO is a non-budgeted entity that allows the state to own or develop property for economic development purposes. I'm going to start with MEDCO's financial statement on page 1. The main takeaway here is that MEDCO's net operating income in fiscal 2022 continued to be positive and increased quite a bit to $26.9 million, which represents the highest level in over a decade. Also, on the last line, you can see that MEDCO ended fiscal 2022 with negative net assets at about negative $278 million, which I'll discuss further in a minute. First, a couple quick updates. MEDCO adopted its first strategic plan last June with key pillars including supporting the development of targeted industries, partnering with Maryland's federal facilities and higher education institutions, fostering inclusive and equitable growth, and engaging in strategic placemaking initiatives. Last year's capital budget provided MEDCO with $2.5 million in general obligation bonds to develop sensitive compartmented information facilities, or SCIFs, in southern Maryland, which MEDCO is using to fund 2 projects, one in Charles County for the U.S. Bomb Technician Association and one in St. Mary's for the Office of Naval Research. This year's capital budget also includes a further $2.5 million for SCIF projects. The fiscal 2024 allowance also includes $10 million budgeted in the Department of Commerce for a grant to MEDCO contingent on the Innovation Economy Infrastructure Act, or House Bill 552, which was just introduced yesterday. Exhibit 1 on page 6 shows MEDCO's net assets over time. The red line represents net assets of the facilities MEDCO owns and operates, currently totaling 15, while the blue line is for non-operating projects, where MEDCO generally serves as an arm's-length financing entity. Operating facilities net assets increased in fiscal 2022 for the first time since fiscal 2013. The increase is driven by a gain of $61 million at the Chesapeake Bay Conference Center project from an agreement with the project manager to waive certain management fees. Despite the increase, MEDCO's net assets remain negative, which is largely the result of MEDCO adding new operating projects as well as yearly income deficits at the Chesapeake Bay Conference Center in previous years. A net asset deficit is not necessarily a concern for projects as long as they continue to have a positive net operating income, as most of MEDCO's operating projects do. Exhibit 2 on page 8 shows the operating income by project. Overall, the net operating income for MEDCO's operating facilities increased in fiscal 2022 to $25.5 million, up from pandemic lows in the prior 2 years of $1 million and $7.6 million. In particular, revenues at the Chesapeake Bay Conference Center project increased significantly and became positive as travel rebounded after the pandemic. 2 projects posted losses in fiscal 2022 compared to 5 in fiscal 2021. Although the Chesapeake Bay Conference Center had a good year and MEDCO reports that occupancy levels are at the highest since 2008, the project remains classified as a non-performing project, as it has been since 2014. Despite increased revenues, the project was not able to make full debt service payments, although additional interest payments were made. Investors have repeatedly extended 6-month forbearance agreements, which is expected to continue. Several of MEDCO's other projects that had recently been classified as non-performing or in watch status recovered during fiscal 2022 and are now considered performing, including the Baltimore City Garages project, as well as the Purple Line, for which MEDCO issued new bonds last April to complete the project. Lastly, I'd like to talk about student housing, which accounts for most of MEDCO's operating facilities. During the pandemic, revenues at student housing projects suffered as schools transitioned to more remote and hybrid learning environments. Occupancy in many projects remained low for an extended period, and as a result, several projects entered watch status. While most projects had recovered by the end of fiscal 2022, the projects at Frostburg, Towson, and UMB have had a slower recovery. As shown in Exhibit 3 on page 10, the housing projects at these schools failed to meet the required debt coverage ratio at the end of fiscal 2022. Medco retained a management consultant for these projects as required. The Towson project has increased occupancy and is expected to meet the required coverage ratio for fiscal 2023, while the other two projects are not. Medco continues to anticipate that all student housing projects will be able to fund operating expenses and meet their upcoming debt service payments. Finally, Medco is a non-budgeted entity and DLS has no recommendations. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We have with us today Tom Sadowski, the Executive Director, and Jim Miller, Chief Financial Officer.
Very good. Thank you.
Go
Thank
ahead.
you so much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to address this committee. Emily, thank you very much for your terrific report on our operations. You've just been a terrific source of support, and we really enjoy our collaboration. My name, again, for the record, is Tom Sadowski, Executive Director of the Maryland Economic Development Corporation, and I have to say it's always great to go after my colleagues at the university system. During my 5 years there as Vice Chancellor for Economic Development, they really inspired a lot of the work and the way of doing business that we've adopted at Medco. So it's always great to see them and hear good things and collaborate with them on projects. We've provided both written testimony as well as our most recent annual report to you, the legislature, as part of our testimony. It summarizes our legislative origin, corporate structure, and highlights of our key projects, as Emily has summarized. As you will note, our portfolio is extremely broad and reflects our vast legislative capabilities to assist in pursuit of Maryland's economic development objectives in partnership with public, private, and nonprofit stakeholders statewide. Over the past 18 months, Maryland and its residents have heroically emerged from the effects of the pandemic, and along the way, Medco has endeavored to be much more proactive, going out and meeting with key state and local partners to address their immediate and ongoing needs and objectives. This has led to the pursuit of many new and exciting projects, and as Emily had profiled, the development of our first strategic plan. So we're really focused now on key initiatives, those of import to our state and local partners. We mentioned target industry development, working with Commerce and TEDCO, innovation capacity development, working with our higher ed and federal institutions, supporting inclusive and equitable economic growth, which is a key priority for all of us at the state and local level, and strategic placemaking, really making a concerted effort to create these environments that uplift communities and help leverage our key innovation and educational assets. So with this refined focus, we've helped to pursue a number of exciting and transformative projects over the past year. They include the redevelopment of the Hillman Garage and the Annapolis City Dock. That was over $70 million.
And when will that be completed?
Oh, as soon as we can
Everybody
possibly
wants to
get it
know.
done. Yes, I know. I know. I can get you a revised timeline on that, but we're working hard at that for sure. The SCIF facilities that Emily had mentioned down in southern Maryland, that's just resulted in some terrific economic activity. For every $1 that we've invested from state capital grant, we've gotten another $4 from private sector match, and it's going to create over 200 jobs there. And then we continue to work with our partners at Morgan State University on the transformation of that campus. I think we're well in upwards of $180 million now of new investment in facilities and amenities for those students. Overall, we share the enthusiasm I think everybody feels right now today in Maryland with our new governor and this legislature and some of the priorities being discussed. And it's really helped to inspire the development not only of our strategic plan, but our new core focus and values at Medco. And they reflect really the work that we're doing both internally as a team and externally as a partner in economic development. And those 4 pillars are equity, integrity, community, and excellence. And working in this manner, we believe that we can and will grow Maryland's economy in a manner that does benefit all Marylanders. So in addition to the DLS report and the great work that Emily's done, we're here to answer any questions that you may have. And thank you once again for your support of Medco and our efforts.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the committee? I think we're good.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy your Friday. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have the Executive Department from the Governor. Ryan Green is our analyst. Welcome.
There we go. Minor technical difficulties. Hi. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Ryan, and I'll be presenting the Governor's office. Thank you. As we can see on page 1, the fiscal 2024 budget increases by $1.76 million, or 12.2%, to $16.2 million. There's one proposed deficiency, which is $870,000 for 17 new positions, which the agency should comment on. If we look at the budget breakdown in Exhibit 1 on page 2, we can see that the vast majority of the agency's spending goes towards personnel, with a variety of other charges, such as office expenses and rent, contributing the rest. If we look at the where it goes chart on page Exhibit 2 on page 3, we can again see that the large increases in the budget are mainly due to the new positions. Finally, our recommendation is that we concur with the Governor's allowance. Thank you, and I'll answer any other questions you have at this time.
That was very short and sweet.
Short and sweet agency.
Okay, we have Mona Vaidya, Director of Financial Administration in the Office of the Governor. Are you here? Come on up to the table.
And Chairman, we also have Fagan Harris, Chief of Staff, that will be joining us.
Absolutely. Welcome. Come to the table.
Good afternoon.
Okay. Go ahead.
Happy Friday, everyone. Thank you for giving us the chance to come in and speak with you today. So thank you again for the opportunity to appear before your subcommittee to review the proposed budget for the Office of the Governor. I'd like to thank our assigned analyst, Mr. Ryan Green. He's been absolutely terrific for his thorough analysis. I'm pleased to note that he's concluded that we proposed a responsible spending plan for fiscal year 24. The subcommittee has our written testimony before them. And the Office of the Governor respectfully agrees with the recommended action, and I'm here to answer any questions or engage in any topics that you wish to get into today.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? You're going to get off really easy for your first presentation here.
Wow,
Have a nice afternoon.
Very touched. Thank you very much. We appreciate
Thank
it
you.
very, very much.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, that ends our hearing for the day, everyone. Thank you.